So would groups in the zombie apocalypse be morally obligated to let people in? Specifically, would they be obligated to let Kenny in at the end of season 2 if when him and Clementine make it to Wellington? It's a big thing for me. I love looking at the different moral structures of different groups within the zombie apocalypse in the Walking Dead universe. It's a lot of fun because we have the standardized way that we do things in our own world, the modern world, and then every different kind of genre, different fictional universes, they all have their different rules about how their societies function and all that kind of thing. But The Walking Dead is an interesting one because it gives us a glimpse into a lot of different ways of doing things in the zombie apocalypse, a lot of different moral conundrums and ideas about how things should be handled. With Wellington in particular, we don't know a ton about them, but what we do know is that when Clementine and Kenny show up to Wellington, they are told that basically we're not accepting anybody new right now. We don't have the supplies, we don't have the resources to bring in new people, so we aren't taking anybody in. The lady up top, she walks away. I don't remember her name. She's a bit character, but she walks away. She comes back and says, actually, we can take Clementine. We can take the girl and the baby, but we can't take Kenny. We can't take you. You're going to have to go. And so you have to make a decision as Clementine to either go with Kenny and just say, screw it, I'm not staying here, or stay at Wellington with AJ. But should Wellington be morally obligated? Should Wellington be letting people in? I would say that, I mean, ideally, if you have the resources, if you have more manpower, makes, you can get more done. If you have more people to pull guard duty, you have more people. Yes, maybe you're using more resources, but perhaps you can scavenge more resources. Maybe Kenny frees somebody else up. Maybe Kenny can go he can go on runs to get resources. Or maybe he frees up somebody else who is normally on guard duty and he can take their spot while they go out and get more resources. So there's a lot of things to consider there, and especially when you start looking at people as a resource. But looking at people as a resource doesn't always work out the best either, as we see in groups like Sanctuary. Not Sanctuary. We'll get to Sanctuary in a minute. When we look at groups like the Saviors with Negan. Negan sees people as a resource. Now, morally speaking, it's important to point this out because I think there's a lot of confusion whenever we talk about morality. People tend to think that, one, something being moral means that it's right, and if you aren't doing the moral thing, then you're wrong and you're a bad person or immoral. Morality is attached to actions, not people. People can do immoral or immoral things, but those immoral and moral actions are decided by the group as a whole. So a group like Wellington might decide that, well, we can't accept new people because we need to take care of the people we already have. We don't know who's coming in. When a group like the Saviors says, yeah, we want as many people as we can possibly have. However, you're going to live under a dictator. We are going to take part of your resources every week, every month, whatever. We're going to send somebody over to take some of your stuff. And morally speaking, if everybody agrees to that, if they all say, yeah, let's go ahead and do that, well, then that's what the society has accepted. That's what they have decided is moral. Now, a different group might decide that that's not moral. They might decide that that's too far. They don't want to do that. But when we're looking, that's the fascinating thing when we're looking at these different groups, because each group's going to decide what works for them. And ultimately, that's what morals are. It's a bedrock for society. It's how we decide what works, what doesn't work, what we agree to, what we will allow, what we won't allow. Now, in modern society, we see a lot of different ways of doing things, but for the most part, especially if you look at more, developed first world kind of countries, you think of like the United States or England, you look at how things are done. And some of it actually reminds you a little bit of the Saviors, where, everybody has to put in their share. It's basically paying a tax. The Saviors are like, hey, send us up stuff and we will take care of you. It's an extortion racket at the end of the day, but it's still kind of like a tax system. You're part of our group. If somebody were to attack one of the groups that's aligned with the Saviors, which is something we see kind of with the satellite set up there, but we don't really see it as far as the hilltop. If somebody were to attack the hilltop, would the Saviors come in to save the day? How would that work? So from the Savior standpoint, people are a resource. They would want more people in. They're trying to expand. They're trying to do bigger things. Wellington might not be that way. I mentioned sanctuary because sanctuary is another good one to look at when you're talking about groups and societies and how things are done in the apocalypse, because sanctuary did allow people in. Sanctuary at first, when they kind of started the whole thing, it was the idea of the sanctuary for all. Those who arrive survive. They were trying to put things up along the railroad tracks. They were trying to broadcast out, come to sanctuary. We can make a better world. We can do good things. But the wrong people showed up. And that's when you start to question whether or not it actually would be right, whether or not they ought to let people in. Maybe it would make more sense for a society in the zombie apocalypse type of situation to lock down completely, to build up their walls and say, we're not letting anybody in regardless of the sort. We don't care. We are going to protect our own inside, but we don't want anybody else in. Because when Sanctuary did let somebody else in, they wound up in a bad spot, and a lot of them got killed, and some of them got eaten, which is where they started the whole cannibalism thing. The people at Sanctuary said, well, it happened to us, so we're not going to play nice anymore. We're going to set this whole elaborate ruse up, and we're going to lure people in, and we're going to get ours. We'll take their stuff, and then we'll have something to eat all the time. We got fresh barbecue. Like, that's the direction that they took with it, was, yes, we'll allow people in, but only insofar as we can use them. And that's where you kind of flip the script as a survivor if you roll up on a place like Wellington. Kenny and Clementine, for me, when I was playing the game the first time that they rolled up on Wellington, I wound up going with Kenny because I was like, I don't really trust these people. She seems nice, but she walks away and comes back like, okay, yeah, we can take the defenseless little girl and the baby, but not the guy, not the fully grown man who can do, he looks like he can get some shit done. We aren't going to take him. We're going to take the kids. And my first thought was, are they trying to manipulate them? Or what are they going to do to them once they get inside? From Kenny's standpoint, it always kind of bugged me a little bit that he's like telling Clementine, you need to go inside. I want what's best for you. This is the right thing where you can be safe and protected. But he didn't know anything about what was going on in there. At a minimum, he should have been like, yeah, let me see what y'all got going on here before I let them stay, because I'm fine with letting them stay if it's safe, right? So it's the both sides of the coin there. If you are the person trying to get into the community, you got to be wary of what the community's got going on, just as much as the community has to be wary when they're letting new people in. And we see this with Richmond in the game in season 3, where the group rolls up to Richmond, and you've got Javier and Trip and Eleanor and all them, and they roll up to the gates of Richmond. And because Javier's brother's in there, they're allowed in. And Richmond had been letting people in. They'd been vetting them, which probably the best way that you could possibly do things as a society if you're trying to figure out whether you should allow people in. They vet them. They keep them in like a jail cell for a while. They ask them questions. They try to get to know them. And they wind up eventually letting them in, but they let in the wrong people because Javier and the group kind of bring everything down. And it's a question of how things should be run, because Richmond had their own moral code, at least as far as the leadership was concerned. Joan was sending people out to raid other settlements because they needed supplies. And morally speaking, as a group, if you've decided that we have to do what we have to do to survive, do you really have a moral obligation to other groups? If you have the power to take what they have and you need those supplies to help you survive, where does that moral obligation lie? And for a lot of people, if you're looking at something like duty-based ethics, deontology, a lot of these questions become a little less convoluted because duty-based morality is typically around what we owe to each other. And it would say that most groups, most of the time, you should let people in. If you have food and shelter and safety and you have walls, the right thing to do is to look out for your fellow human beings, right? It would be the same thing when it comes to how Joan handles everything and sending people out. Is, morally speaking, duty-based ethics would say that, no, you shouldn't be taking supplies and killing people and doing that is all just wrong. Even from somebody like the Saviors, when you have Negan, The duty-based ethics would say that what he's doing would be wrong because he's harming other people. And in the long run, maybe other settlements are safer. Maybe everybody kind of prospers together. But ultimately, that's not how things are being run because Negan typically winds up killing somebody to show his dominance at first. And it's not like they're helping other settlements out and saying, hey, we've got a stock of supplies. You guys have had a hard couple of months. We're going to give you some of our, like, they aren't doing any of that kind of stuff. So from a deontological standpoint, a lot of the times these kind of groups are up in the air is not that great and really shouldn't be doing the things that they're doing if that's what they ascribe to. However, from a utilitarian standpoint, a lot of them are doing what they need to do to survive, and they're looking out for the overall well-being of themselves, of their group. They're looking at the others, which traditionally that's a lot of how human beings act. That's how we've done things for millennia. You have the in group, you have me and my group, and then you and your group. And I have to do what I have to do to help my group survive. When you look at a group, for instance, we'll go back to season 1, the very first season, the second episode, right? Right after they get off of the farm and they're heading back and they're still starving because most of them didn't eat part of Mark. So they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. And they find this car that's abandoned. And they kind of look around and they're like, well, there's nobody around. Maybe we should just take this stuff because it's full of supplies. There's medical stuff in there. There's clothes. There's food. There's things that we could use to help us survive. And from a utilitarian standpoint, morally speaking, you would say, hey, yeah, that's probably the right thing to do for our group. And even these other groups, you could use utilitarian morality to look at. This is helping us in the long run. Even Negan and the Savior's way of doing things, that is actually kind of helping other groups in the long run. If you really stop to think about what potentially could be there, especially if the Saviors were doing things to try to help out the other groups that were under their umbrella, right? If they are sending forces whenever they're needed to help defend the places, if they are sending things down, and maybe it's a harsh system, maybe it's harsh punishments, maybe it's an unfair system. But at the end of the day, if everybody is surviving, that's really what utilitarianism is looking for, is what's the thing that's going to bring the most benefit to the most people? How are we going to take care of everybody that we have to take care of? So really, you could argue that the Saviors, even something like Terminus, would be considered. I was thinking of sanctuary. I said sanctuary earlier. I meant Terminus. Why was I thinking of sanctuary? Terminus. Terminus is where they were eating people and luring them in. But if you're looking even at something like Terminus, if you're trying to help your own group out, who do you owe it to anybody else to help them out? Should you? The risk that they take, when they took that risk before and it wound up biting them in the ass, should you really take the risk of allowing other people in? Wouldn't it be best for you overall in your group to take care of your own, to do the right thing and maybe taking out the people that are coming in is taking care of your own. Maybe that's what's for the best for your group overall. You're taking out stragglers, really. You're taking out people that are part of their own group. So it's a question of like, what is everybody doing? Who are we looking out for? Are we looking out for ourselves? Are we looking out for other people? And this isn't just true in a zombie apocalypse, because I've noted in some of the comments that I've seen recently that a lot of people will say morality dies with, you can't worry about morals during the zombie apocalypse. But the truth is that morality and moral systems are what hold us together as groups, as society. Morals are nothing more than an agreed upon set of rules, what we will and will not allow. So with each group, they have to decide, what are we okay with? Are we okay with killing people that we have to kill? Are we okay with not allowing people in, letting people starve and die out in the cold or getting eaten by zombies? You look at a group like the gas station group from 400 Days, and that group, they had to decide what to do with somebody who was trying to steal food. That guy couldn't speak English, so they didn't know what he was saying or where he was from. They didn't know anything about him, but they knew that he was trying to steal things. He might have been desperate. He might have been an asset to the group, but they couldn't take that risk. They either had to let him go or kill him. No matter what, though, that was still trying to let him stay. You didn't know what his intentions were. Even if he could speak the same language as them, he could lie. So maybe it would have been morally right to make sure that he couldn't do anything. He couldn't be a part of it. Don't let anybody join you. Maybe that's the moral decision to make. And it all comes down to what we ought to do. What is our moral duty to each other? How do we look out? Do we need to look out for complete strangers in any sense of the word? Because this is applicable just as much in our modern world as it is in the zombie apocalypse. Even in modern society, we have to ask ourselves on a consistent basis, if my community is doing good, but your community is suffering, how much do I owe your community? And this is true on an international level. This is true on a local level. We see this all the time. And often we'll see communities helping each other out, especially in a local sense. And sometimes even on the other side of the world, we'll see people willing to put their money, their time on the line, their safety even on the line to help out other groups, even on the other side of the world. Because in some sense, that makes a lot of people think that that's the right thing to do. They just feel inherently. And that wouldn't change just because we have the zombie apocalypse. Because when you have an established society like Richmond or like the Saviors, Sanctuary, that's where I was getting Sanctuary from, like the Saviors, Alexandria, Alexandria is another great example of a society that allowed people in. They took the time to try to vet them a little bit, but they were very welcoming. And Aaron did his due diligence typically to try to figure out whether the group was going to be a risk or not. But at the end of the day, even that wasn't enough to stop what happened in the end, because Alexandria fell because they brought in new people. Who knows how long they might have lasted if they hadn't done that. So even then they're taking a risk. And the question is when do we not take those risks? When do we set aside and say, we're not going to do this? We aren't going to help each other out. Do we do it because there's a disaster? Do we do it in a circumstance where it feels like the world has ended or where the world has actually ended? If we have the ability, if we can grow the crops, look at a community like the Kingdom, right? They can grow their own crops. They've got their own, their own livestock. They've got a lot of resources, which is why the Saviors like them so much, because they were able to provide a lot of stuff. And if you're able to provide that stuff, do you have a moral obligation, a reason that should you have to allow other people in? Is that something that you should have to say, yeah, we've got plenty, so we're going to help you out? Or are you right to maybe not do that? Maybe you're right to hoard all of that stuff to yourself and take care of you and yours and try to grow your community from the inside. But I want to know what you guys have to say about this, because this is a big topic, and I want to make sure that you think it through. Pay close attention and really think about it. If you were in a community, put yourself in any of the communities in the Walking Dead universe. Pick your favorite. Alexandria, Wellington, the Saviors compound, wherever you happen to be. The Oceanside is one I didn't even mention. Wherever you happen to be within the Walking Dead universe, what would be the threshold that you would argue, yes, we should bring in people? And how far would you go in trying to exclude and say, no, we're not going to help anybody? If you are the deciding vote, everybody else is looking to you and they're saying, hey, we've got plenty of stuff here. We have security, we have walls, we have safety, and these people want to come in. Maybe a solo individual, maybe a small group, would you vote to let them in if you've got plenty? And alternatively, if you're trying to get into a community, how suspicious are you? Would you want to join a community? Would you really want that? Think about that as well. Let me know down in the comments what you think about that. I'm also interested to know what other moral conundrums you guys would like to hear me talk about, not just in the Walking Dead universe. I've got some other things planned. I'm going to be talking about the Incredibles and the Avengers when it comes to superheroes, and whether, what the morality of superheroes is, and whether they should be allowed, if there was a thing like superheroes, whether laws that limit them would be moral. There's a lot to talk about there. I've also got some fun stuff planned over the next couple of months. I've got some fun Halloween movies coming up that we're going to be talking about, Halloween movies and shows. So keep an eye out for all of that stuff, and let me know in the comments what else you would like to see, because I'm trying to keep a tally of everything going on and what you guys are looking at. and especially the comments that get if somebody has already commented something and you like it, the ones that get the most likes. Speaking of liking, like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be talking about a lot of stuff coming up. So there's a lot of cool shit going on. That's all I've got for this one, though. I do want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.